And moving straight to our next discussion, we have Jochen Schwill, who co-founded the German digital utility Next Kraftwerke, which is now one of the largest virtual power plants in Europe. He received his PhD from the Energy Economics Institute at the University of Cologne and is very passionate about renewable energy, energy markets, and digitalization. With him, we also have our very own Tim Steinmetz, Chief Growth Officer at gridX. Tim has over 10 years of experience in the energy industry, having worked as a consultant in the field of CO2 trading, as a sales and project manager at Antelios, and he's now responsible for the establishment of gridX's growth team. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Greta. Thanks for having us.
So let's dive straight into the questions. Jochen, how would you describe energy flexibility and why is it so important when it comes to renewable energy?
Hi Greta, thank you very much for the question. It's all about flexibility. So when it comes to more and more penetration of renewable energies, so we see, of course, PV right now kicking in very heavily all over the world. In Germany, we expect it to double the installed capacity within the next 10 years. So we come from 50 gigawatts to 100 gigawatts just for Germany, and that counts for all over the world. So we get more and more intermittent capacity in the market, and so the consequence will be, how can we integrate this? So the first challenge was, how can we get the right incentives in place to get the capacity built? And now the challenge is, how can we integrate this? And this is all about flexibility, Greta.
And Tim, from your perspective, what are the different methods of enhancing flexibility and which industry players are involved in this?
So very good question. Indeed, there are different methods and approaches to use flexibility already today. I assume there will be much more in the future, but today, for example, in Central Europe, we see that you can participate with your flexibility in balancing services for TSOs, or the very large grid operators, to keep the frequency in the grid stable, for example. Or you can join congestion management programs, demand response programs, which are more organized by integrated utilities or DSOs. And there it's more about solving local or at least regional oversupplies or undersupplies, for example, caused by renewable energy, as Jochen said. And these programs are maybe more common in the US and Australia at the moment, but I think it will come in other regions and countries as well. And one very interesting approach from my point of view is using time of use tariffs. So also as a residential customer, you can choose for a time of use tariff at your energy supplier and get remunerated for it when you use energy at the right time, basically. But there also it depends in the country we are living in. So some countries like in Scandinavia are far ahead, for example, like we are in Germany. But I think it will evolve here as well. And you also ask for the industry players who are involved. I think that's also quite different. So I mentioned the residential side, which is already available in some regions. But for the balancing services, for example, there at the moment, it's very restrictive because of high requirements to participate in these markets. And what we see mainly in Central Europe or Germany is that there are still large power plants participating, heavy industrial loads, wind parks are joining, and large-scale batteries actually have a major part of the frequency reserve market already now.
And
maybe if I might add to this, Greta. Yes, okay, thank you very much. Sorry for jumping in here.
Go for it.
Okay, great. So it's just because, Next Kraftwerke, we as a company, so one of our target is really to source flexibility. So that is, let's say, an added value which we bring to the market, finding the right flexibility and integrate it first. And so it's about looking into the merit order of flexibility is exactly what you said just now, Tim. So what is the cheapest flexibility first? And I think that is one of our targets, to source the best flexibility when it's needed. So maybe it's not right now the time for fridges or washing machines to integrate as flexibility towards the power market, because there are still cheaper flexibilities in the market to integrate. But I'm pretty sure, and Tim, we just talked about that earlier. Yesterday, I had a discussion on residential flexibilities, and the question was, when is the right time for residential flexibilities to integrate? And I think here we are talking about the main game changer, which is kicking in quite heavily on a short notice, and this is electromobility. So I have a car at home with 100 kilowatt hours, so that is, let's say, huge, bigger than all the electricity consumers I have in my house or otherwise, or next to my car. So I think today it's just starting with residential ones. Of course, first of all, the flexibility is coming from conventional power plants, small scale, maybe anaerobic digestion plants, biogas plants, CHPs, and then demand side management, bigger assets like the aluminium industry, steel industry. But then, and now we are in Germany at the point in time that we have to integrate the residential flexibilities.
And what do you think are the current strengths and weaknesses of the setup that we have now?
So for Germany, I would say, you just mentioned it, Tim. So for residential customers, I think what we need is to integrate them into the power grid more and more. So time of use tariffs, I think that is crucial to integrate them. And I think in general talking, so I think I could mention some points for Germany and for Europe, and maybe to put it more general, it is very important that we have a regulation which is going along with the integration of renewable energies, that is dynamic and which is changing, because I want to have a market, but a market needs to be designed by regulators, and this is necessary because we are in the power market, which of course we have constraints with the grid. We have problems with a lot of problems, and so that needs to be solved. And we need to have a strong regulation and a dynamic regulation, which needs to change over time a lot. And I think there in Germany, now it's time to change some things. One part is time of use tariffs, but I could mention also some more, I think.
Yeah, fully agree from my side. So needs to be dynamic. Maybe to add is that it needs also be faster. The worst case is that you need, from a regulation point of view, over 10 years to define a regulation that incentives, for example, charging stations or smart meters to be used in the field. And then when you start to roll out after 10 years, you recognize the technology is completely outdated and you can't actually manage the use cases you need today. So Jochen mentioned that it needs to be dynamic, and the use cases and the markets where we can place flexibility and where we need to use flexibility will change over time. And I think that will evolve very, very fast, which is uncommon actually to the energy market when we look behind in the history. But I think we see a major disruption here also in the market itself. So we need to be fast and very dynamic.
And Tim, how do you think we can strike a good balance between competitive and regulated?
Yeah, I mean, we partly talked about it. So it's a very tough question. Generally, I'm a big fan of the competitive approach, to let especially customers decide what the best option is for them, because usually you have different options if you have a more or less free market. But as Jochen said, and there I fully agree, you need definitely regulation to move the things into the right direction. And then it can be a massive accelerator for market adoption. So just look at the subsidies at the moment in Europe for installing charging infrastructure, which really leads to huge growth curves and pushing new flexible assets into the market, like Jochen said with his electric vehicle at home. So that's exactly the example. And following this, energy suppliers, for example, or also new market players, like transforming oil and gas companies or startups, software companies, OEMs providing now digital energy products. They can create innovative products for wallbox owners, so charging your electric vehicle and offering cheaper tariffs, for example, if you as a customer provide charging flexibility when it's really needed for the grid.
Right. I would also, if I may, Greta, I would also say it's not a conflict in interest between regulation and competition. So I think regulation is needed, and a strong regulation is needed to set up a level playing field. And then competition should find the best solution and maybe source the best flexibilities and also bring innovation into the market. I think the liberalization which took place in Europe was essential also for companies like gridX, like Next Kraftwerke, to pop up, and that innovation is taking place. And this innovation, and this is what we see in the whole economy right now, that this is more and more coming from newcomers, from startup companies. And this is what we just get if we have and allow competition. And so I'm a big fan of competition, of innovation, but of course, in the energy industry, we need to have a strong regulation and a level playing field, which allows that.
And speaking of innovation there, Jochen, how can new technology be securely implemented into the system?
So our technology is about getting the assets into, or making them participating into the power markets. So we, when we started, we said, okay, we concentrate on small scale assets. Now I would say, as we position ourselves as Next Kraftwerke is positioned, we are more in the mid-cap right now. We are still on the wholesale market. We integrate power assets from 100 kilowatts towards some 100 megawatts right now even. And right now we are entering into the smaller scale. Here, as Next Kraftwerke, we position ourselves more as an enabler for companies like gridX or Sonnen, who have a pre-aggregation of smaller assets even, and we then bring these bulk of assets towards the wholesale market and are the interface towards the TSO or wholesale power markets. The technology is about to make it possible to get the live data, first of all, from 100,000 and millions of assets in the future, and then also make them steerable to have the possibility to react on intermittent capacity. So it's a technology in the end, a platform which is able to really act within lifetime on power price signals on the market, on weather, and getting the data and pushing dispatch signals towards small-scale units. And this is not only happening for Europe. I think here it's really starting right now, but this will be a task, a challenge for the whole world once we go to renewable energies in the whole world.
And Tim, which customer groups need to be taken into consideration, and how can we ensure that all of their needs are met?
I would say ideally every customer or asset group which could provide flexibility would be able to take part in some markets, but only as long as it's economically and ecologically useful. So that's basically what Jochen mentioned by the merit order. So it doesn't make sense at the moment to put a fridge from your residential home into the high standard, high security frequency market at the moment. It's just too expensive to connect it and to fulfill all the requirements. But I think that it's really crucial to include flexibility of the residential and the SMB customers, so small businesses, as the sum of the whole capacity in the future, and also the wide distribution of this flexibility will really have huge value for the energy system. And I always mention one of my favorite studies about that. eBridge Consulting brought out a study, I think 1.5 years ago, and they said when you're able to control, only in Germany, all these millions of charging stations, I think they predicted 8 million electric vehicles, and millions of electric heatings, 12 gigawatts of battery capacity, and you make them controllable and manageable, you will be able to save up to 40 to 60% investments into the grid infrastructure. And of course, by this, also save millions of tons of CO2 and even reduce curtailment of the renewable energy energy production by over 60%. So when we achieve that, integrating these small scale customers affordable at a cost affordable level, I think that would be really a major step.
Yeah. I think today it's about, on the one hand, you have the cost of connection, what you just mentioned, Tim. On the other hand, you have the value of the flexibility.
Indeed.
And I would say, of course, value of flexibility increases once we have a higher penetration of renewable energies. At the same time, I think maybe the kicker is also to bring down the cost of connection. And I think with more and more technology, with IoT technology, it might be one point in time where we have maybe no really added or no real cost on the connection any longer, because more or less on IoT technology, it's not really a matter of costs. Yeah, it's just plug and play more or less on a household level. And then it's not any longer the merit order of flexibilities where we have to find the tipping point when it's worth it to integrate this flexibility, because today it's really about cost. So it's about sourcing it, finding it, sales, and connecting it, and pre-qualify it maybe to the TSO. And maybe in the future, and I think we are going towards that point, it's plug and play, and then it's no real cost to integrate the flexibility. And I think to that point, we need to come.
And Tim, how do you think we can better optimize decentralized production and consumption?
Yeah, I think that's basically what we're just discussing. It's really about connecting all the relevant energy assets with IoT technology and newest cloud technology, because at the one hand, it's comparably cheap. On the other hand, it's, if you use state-of-the-art cloud technology, also very, very safe and secure. So basically make all these production and consumption assets manageable, be able to put the flexibility at the right time in the right spot or market. So sometimes on Monday morning, it could be that it's useful to use it for your local home and be very self-sufficient. On noon, it can be valuable to help the local grid operator to solve a congestion, because you have thousands of photovoltaic inverters producing electricity, and then with charging your electric vehicle, you can solve that congestion. And in the afternoon or the evening, it could be that on the whole grid level in Europe, there's a frequency drop because of a power plant trip or whatever. And then it might make sense to shift that flexibility also of millions of residential customers into that market. So I think we need to be able to make it manageable, but also we need to be able to put the flexibility at the right time into the right spot.
But there you are mentioning an interesting point, Tim. I think the question is really who is demanding the flexibility and on which markets. So today, a market of flexibility mainly is organized, so there are some, you mentioned that, I think, at the beginning of our discussion. Let's take the frequency control market and ancillary service market. This is mainly the TSO today, and this is for us more or less with the wholesale intraday market. This is coming in more and more, but there are just few markets where we can offer the flexibility towards. And then there's still some markets, well, it's not really markets, but flexibility demand, which is not into a market approach, like the redispatch, the so-called redispatch, where we say we have one German power market, and within this German power market, there's no price difference. And of course, there is scarcity in between northern Germany and southwestern Germany, because we have problems to get the power from north to south. And then what's happening is the TSO is doing redispatch, ramping up and ramping down big power plants besides the market, spending $1 billion, more than $1 billion, increasing the costs, more than $1 billion per year into this redispatch. This is just done by big power plants. We will not have them any longer. So we need to find a solution to solve exactly this local flexibility demand that we have already today, but which is solved not in a market approach without any innovation, just from big power plants spending too much euro into that. So we need to find a new market design, which is kind of a platform where several players demand maybe flexibility, and others offer flexibility, such as gridX and Next Kraftwerke. And the demand could then come from the TSO, from the DSO, and maybe just from the market, from balancing group operators. And this is a challenge in the end, again, maybe for the regulator to set that up, and then for innovative companies to find solutions to provide flexibility.
How can end users and industry clients ensure that they've got the most cost-effective and efficient solutions?
So, talking about end users, I think from my point of view, as an end user, you should really look for solutions that allow you to use already today your flexibility, and providers need to make that transparently to first reduce your supply costs and also, of course, your CO2 footprint. So one of the easiest solutions is really to use a time of use tariff, as long as you have flexible assets, of course, in your home. And I think who will provide these solutions. In the end, the battle of providers is not decided yet and completely open, I think. So the competition Jochen mentioned a couple of times, I think it's just starting, actually. So the competition about the prosumers, for example, and the residential households with EVs in the garage. And I think it will be probably decided between traditional utilities, which are transforming, OEMs, which are integrating into new product landscapes. And then I mentioned the transforming oil and gas companies who move from fossil fuels also to electricity business. And then new market players like startups, software companies who are really building themselves from scratch and hitting very specific points in the market or at customer needs, and ramp up very fast and fight for the end customers. And in the end, it really depends who delivers the best innovative energy product and improves it over time. So we mentioned that as well for the regulation part, but I think for the delivery part, so who delivers these products into the market, it's extremely important that you're able to optimize and to re-innovate and to update your products over time to keep pace with this new energy era.
Jochen, final words?
Yeah, I was just waiting for you, maybe another question. Yeah, final words. So we are on a good track, and I want to take it and stay positive on the so-called Energiewende, on the energy transition. I'm really enthusiastic about that. I'm happy to work in a company which is working on this. And I'm pretty confident that we now speed up with that. Of course, the challenge will increase. So integrating the first 30 to 40%, that was the easiest ones. Now the challenge will increase, but I'm pretty confident that we have very innovative companies out there who can solve these challenges. And so I'm looking forward to that and follow the discussion from today.
Challenge accepted, I would say.
Exactly. Thank you both so much for taking the time today. It was a very insightful discussion, and it makes me very excited for the future.
Thank you,
Greta. Thank you, Jochen. Take care.
Thank you, Tim.